Art imitates life, and so the Call of Duties and Battlefields of the last 20 years have used wars past, present, and future to flavor their stories and settings. These games were created with the end goal being fun, profit, or both. However, there are other reasons to make a video game, and these fringe cases often lead us to view the whole medium in a different light. America's Army is one such case, a series now over 20 years in development, created and published by an entity not known for its game development history. Today, we're going to talk about the official video game of the United States military, America's Army. America's Army is a series of games that are free-to-play, round-based first-person shooters. The vision for the original was conceived in 1999 by Army economist Colonel Casey Wardinsky, who wanted to, quote, provide the public a virtual soldier experience that was engaging, informative, and entertaining. With the help of some colleagues, he set up a studio at the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California, and started recruiting game developers with a development budget of $5 million. Unreal Engine was used for its development and would continue to be used for all entries in the next 20 years, notably being the first game released to be using Unreal Engine 2. From the start, the game did not shy away from being a marketing tool for the American military. In fact, in a now archived FAQ page, the developers confirmed that a reason people all around the world can play the game is to see, quote, how great the US Army is. The gameplay of the first title could be compared to many FPS contemporaries. One of the original goals for the game was to create an appeal similar to Counter-Strike. Likely because of this, familiar Counter-Strike-esque modes were present for most of the multiplayer gameplay, but also included were combat operations that would simulate situations like an assault on a terrorist camp. While some of the gameplay looks and plays very familiar to what modern FPS gamers are used to, because the game wasn't concerned about player numbers or generating a profit, it could make some serious design decisions that propelled the vision for the game, informing the American public about what being in the military is like. For example, in order to play as a combat medic, you had to pass a virtual medical training course that was based on actual training that soldiers receive on administering aid.
Throughout history, soldiers have been helping their injured buddies, and you will be no exception.
Similarly, much like in a real army, pretty much every specialized weapon and vehicle had a training course that you needed to go through and pass a test with, before being able to use it in multiplayer matches. This ended up ensuring that everyone playing really did know how to use all of their tools and weapons effectively during a match, in contrast to modern games where players can pick and play whatever class they wish from the get-go. Besides the boot camps, other more familiar realism features were also present. Guns could jam randomly and would need to be unstuck, aiming down sights had you deal with sway from your breathing, and shooting your colonel would land you in your facility's jail cell.
Ceasefire! Ceasefire!
Every game in the series is free to play, completely devoid of any microtransactions. Although if you're in America, your tax dollars technically paid for the game. Despite having no profit motive, the first America's Army succeeded in what it set out to do, and became the first overt use of computer games for political aims. While it may be popular to think about the game being some sort of secret ploy by the government to recruit teenagers, the people behind the game would never shy away from the reason the game was made in the first place. According to Wardinsky in a New York Times article from 2002, the primary aim was to cut down on recruits who wash out during the 9 weeks of basic and subsequent specialized training, by providing them more information about what the experience would be like. Keep in mind that this was on the brink of the new millennium. Information on anything was not as readily available as it is today, so getting the info out there was something that every organization had to think about. However, doing so through a video game, especially like this, was certainly very forward-thinking. Motives behind development aside, as a game, America's Army was a breakout success, and got a 2.0 only a year later. 6 months later, after release in January 2003, the game had 1.3 million registered players. In 2004, the game had over 4 million, and was the third highest played game as tracked on GameSpy, even beating out the original Call of Duty and Unreal Tournament. The US Army soon realized this was the single most successful marketing campaign that they had ever launched, per the third of 1% of their annual advertising budget that it cost. It was such a success that the higher-ups at the military wanted a more direct role in development, which led to internal conflicts over the game, resulting in a mass exodus and replacement of developers in 2004 and 2005. Even the Navy complained that it wasn't represented within the game, despite being developed in a naval postgraduate school.
I think they brought kind of that level of seriousness to gaming that wasn't really there before. You had an Unreal Tournament and a Counter-Strike were kind of the big games of the day that were more, and just getting out there and trying to get a bunch of kills where, America's Army made it more about the kind of the teamwork and completing the mission than just being at the top of the scoreboard.
That was Daniel Kalenich, an executive producer and programmer on the series.
So I was in college, it was about 2003, and me and my roommates all had one PC that we kind of shared for gaming, and we mostly played Counter-Strike, and one of my roommates downloaded a game called America's Army and said, hey, we should play this game. It's more tactical. We would play it, and it definitely had a slower pace than what we're used to, but I remember it had it gave you some value to your life because the rounds were longer, and you really wanted to stay alive because you didn't want to sit there and watch the round without being a part of it. So
the second game in the series was released only a year after the first, and as a result, both are often conflated in history. The subheading of the title was Special Forces, and according to an official booklet, it was branded as such as a result of the Department of Defense needing more Special Forces soldiers. Quote, consequently, orders trickled down the chain of command and found application in the current release of America's Army. The game itself used the same engine and looked and played similar to its predecessor. However, it benefited from building on the base of the first, and had the opportunity to refine the gameplay and mechanics. As a result, AA2 is viewed as the definitive version of this era of the series, even today still being played through community servers. Many years later in 2008, America's Army 3 was announced and later released the following year. This was an entirely new game with a new engine, but it included the familiar training modes and emphasis on realism. While at this time in gaming the idea of playing as a military soldier was kind of played out, America's Army 3 did not concern itself with trends or crazy environments. Soldiers were still equipped with the standard army weaponry of the time, and wearing the latest issued uniforms and gear. However, the series did grow a bit, allowing the infamous bootcamp training modes to be bypassed entirely. Players could hop in multiplayer matches from the get-go, but if they wished to unlock some special equipment and gear, they still needed to pass training for those. Regardless, the multiplayer remained more or less the same, avoiding free-for-all deathmatch modes in favor of more tactical, methodical gameplay, on some new maps mixed in with fan-favorite ones from previous games that were updated. Like its predecessors, emphasis on teamwork is above all else. Killing an enemy soldier will usually only grant 1 point, but completing an objective for the game mode will grant 4. Friendly fire is punished heavily, and even shooting a wounded enemy soldier from resuscitation is also condemned.
So AA3 had a real heavy focus on realism. Coming off the success of AA2, there was a big focus in AA3 to represent the Army experience. So how the soldiers moved, how they communicated, and the animations, they got a mocap studio, capture studio at the studio itself so they could redo those animations with real soldiers running through them. So I think that was really what set AA3 apart from the other two, is that focus on realism and what it's like to be a soldier.
Unfortunately, America's Army 3 would become the middle child of the series, being between the popular first and second entries and the upcoming soon-to-become longest-running fourth entry. The landscape of games was significantly different and more established than it was in the early 2000s, and by 2009 gamers had plenty of options to choose from. Call of Duty and Battlefield, with their own more exciting, but maybe unrealistic interpretations of the military, had cemented their places as the popular FPSs to play. Perhaps it was the mixed reception, server issues, or netcode issues at launch that led America's Army 3 to be less popular than its predecessor.
So I was brought in just kind of a few months before release to help fix some bugs. I did hear a lot about it as I was working on other projects at the studio. And I got to go to the development team did a mini basic combat training exercise at Fort Jackson. Several of the different teams that were working on the game came and went through a boot camp for a week with real soldiers and everything there. We stayed in the barracks and had to do the whole experience, even though it was shortened for us for a week. But that was really neat to get to just really see what the soldiers are going through in boot camp. Because you can imagine it, but until you actually get there and go through it for a little bit, you don't really understand the experience.
While the quality of the game was still excellent for a free-to-play multiplayer shooter, gaming as a whole was starting to move very fast. And perhaps this was the reason that only 4 years later, the fourth game in the series, America's Army Proving Grounds, entered open beta.
We definitely learned a lot from the first two games and just growing as a studio as well. So one of the key focuses as we were working on Proving Grounds was we wanted to keep the Unreal Engine as untouched as possible. We wanted to be able to upgrade to the latest versions of the engine as Epic released them, and we wanted to make sure that we could take full advantage of all the work Epic was doing when they would release updates.
This entry ended up being the longest in the series' lifespan, and thanks to its 9 years of support and development, it would grow an incredibly dedicated grassroots community.
It's a pretty tight-knit community. it's a very small community too. So pretty much everybody knows each other. So there's a lot of rivalry there. I think, like I said before, it's very simple. The combat is very simple. There's only a handful of rifles that you can use or weapons, and a lot of players appreciate that. I mean, nowadays most games have a million different options, and America's Army does not have that. Is that a bad thing? I think so, but also I think that's part of its charm and why players keep coming back. The players that do. I've always been a fan of pushing the game to its limits, and I love fast-paced combat, and the game really did provide that. For me, though, my favorite part about the game has always been the esports side, the competitive tournaments, leagues, everything else. That is where I thrive. That is, for me, it's all about playing the best of the best. And the game over the years has had some really, really talented players, so it's always been a lot of fun.
That was GTG, a caster for Proving Grounds esports scene. Many of the previous entries in the series were played at high levels, but it would only be the fourth game in the series that would develop a traditional esports environment. GTG and his friends, Arquero and Private, have all been playing the game competitively since its beta in 2012.
There was kind of multiple versions of the esports scene. I guess beta and then beginning of like when the game actually published, or not published, but when official. So that scene, I would say, was really, really good, really, really talented. For example, I know EU players had a lot of talented players, a lot. I know two of our players after that went to Rainbow Six. One of them won the first LAN tournament in Rainbow Six, the season 1, I believe. So there was a lot of talent back then.
Is he gonna peek? Bex, moving it. First kill. Does he find no skill? There, no skill, moving it. Jumping up, a double kill. Oscar needs Pablo with the grenade though as he moves out. Let's look at Jama. He's looking for Pablo. Coming out, jump kill, double kill. Pablo leaving Roby once again left by himself against 3 players.
I randomly got recruited pretty much by a player I used to play with. That is how I personally got into the scene. He just asked if I wanted to join him for a scrim. That's kind of how I got started. And I was immediately hooked. I never wanted to go back to public matches ever again. I just wanted to play scrims, matches, everything else, tournaments. Pubs never had many players, but the competitive scene never had any players. There were a handful of teams that kept playing each other over and over. And the really talented players eventually, without any prize money, without big tournaments, without any reason to keep playing the same people over and over, and the best of the best, they left. They went on to find fortune elsewhere. Think CSGO, Rainbow Six Siege, they were looking for opportunities elsewhere, and I really don't blame them. But I had such high hopes for this game, especially early on, the first couple of years. I don't know why I thought these things, but I never stopped believing.
Then towards later on, it was like, I don't know, the game didn't technically go anywhere. And players, those good players, those top players started feeling like, well, I'm good at video games, I'm good at FPS, but I don't really have a future here. So they kind of strayed in different directions. That I said, some went to Counter-Strike, some went to Rainbow Six, whatever. And then I wouldn't say mediocre, but like kind of medium players stayed, and those players got better. So I would say in general, it's a small scene. It's kind of almost easy to make in the esports scene, but it's hard to make it to the top, if that makes sense.
America's Army Proving Grounds, like its predecessor, was made on Unreal Engine 3. However, it looked and felt similar to many games of today. The game was still incredibly objective-focused, purposely omitting kill streaks and mainstream kill incentives in favor of focusing on tactics and squad gameplay.
Well, I think what APG does really well is that you have a VoIP system, which allows you to get in touch with other players, and which means it's very interactive with the community, and that's many clans, many servers are based on the community itself, and that's how the game has been surviving.
I would say that this game is a really, really, really good combination of CS type of playstyle and let's say a COD-ish type of playstyle, because the game mechanics, you jump around corners, you're kind of accurate, you can, there's ADSing, there's quick cleaning, quick peeking, but then you have a steady like 5v5 environment with team coordination, smokes, there's no respawns, there's no revives. So it's a great mix between high-paced type of Battlefield COD type of mechanics and the steady tactical Counter-Strike-ish type of I guess, game style, if you will.
No skill, moving through, blind kill, finds Nullum. Nullum taking him down, Turk taking down Angel Death. It is Johnson, Nullum left. Objective now in complete control of the defenders. Paulo, 2-on-2, what's happening? Nullum picking him off one by one, but falls to Tyr. And Tyr, double kill for him as he takes down Drons and Nullum both. It is 4-4.
By this point in time, the title was not as focused at being a hardcore real-life representation, instead focusing on streamlining fun multiplayer team-oriented gameplay. The term military simulator, or milsim, was not applied to the US military's video game.
I wouldn't consider this game a simulator or milsim. A3 would probably be the closest of all of them to it, but technology wasn't quite there at the time to have huge maps like you can do now. But we do use the game to make training simulators for official Army trainers. It is used as a military simulator, just not the America's Army game that the public plays necessarily.
While Proving Grounds may have been the series' longest-running game to date, many players felt that some of the more forward-facing parts of it were also the most neglected.
So I wanted to believe for many years that financially the Army would support and market the game. Like I thought, okay, the Army receives a lot of money. Something good has to come out of this. So that is also why I kept believing and kept hoping that the game would take off and the esports scene would grow, that more players would come. However, there was surprisingly very little advertising and marketing from the Army, and the numbers never went up. The game studio has had a very small development team, and it kept getting smaller. And of the incredible amount of money that the military receives, it has been painstakingly obvious that very little of that was allocated to the development of this project.
Realistically speaking, I don't mean to like trash talk anyone or anything, but if they actually decided to back the game up with advertisement, that this game would be a lot bigger than it was. I'm not saying it would get to, millions, but it would definitely be a lot bigger than it was. But like true publishing, I don't think it ever actually had.
In the second decade of its lifespan, America's Army wasn't as popular as it was in its first, and the general reporting around the game didn't serve to help it either. As the public became more marketing averse, the attitude towards the series changed. Most articles referencing the game would highlight the Army's involvement particularly. The phrase military propaganda was used fairly heavily.
I think it's a little bit silly. You would think, like, oh, game is created by the US Army, it must be military propaganda. Those people have never played the game. Apart from personal experiences that certain military personnel shares in between loading screens, but apart from the Army logo and the trivia question and a couple loading videos, there really is nothing that you would never know that it's a US Army game apart from that. Previous Army games had training modes and a lot more information. Proving Grounds really didn't, so I don't think it's military propaganda. Call of Duty would be military propaganda in the same sense. It's just a shooter.
No, it's just a video game that the Army made for public or for advertisement. Same way they sponsor, like US Air Force literally sponsors big CSGO tournaments. I don't see anyone talking about that. That's as big of a propaganda as APG is. Why, it's new age, it's a new world. Video games are a thing. They're literally a thing right now. They're probably the biggest like youth thing out there.
I can understand where they're coming from since it is put out by the US Army, but being a marketing tool, I wouldn't consider it any different than any company's marketing, whether it's commercials or signage. It's not misleading by any means. Propaganda is biased or misleading information. All marketing is, I would argue, is biased since it's being put out by whoever's doing the marketing. But you asked me if I would think it's propaganda, I wouldn't really consider it that, but I work for the Army, so obviously I might disagree with others.
As the saying goes, there's no such thing as bad publicity, and despite what some press would say about the game, it seems like most players were just happy to play their game, many of whom didn't even reside in America. Recently, the game underwent probably its biggest spotlight in the press in recent time, but not for good news. On February 2022, the developers Army Game Studio announced that they would be closing the public servers later in the year.
Well, for a player like me that has been playing this game for so long, it's bad, obviously, but it was something that I was expecting. I don't know exactly why they are doing it now. Yeah, it's sad for me, for sure.
For years, many players have always claimed the game is dying or the game is dead. one of the two. And I was always fighting these words. I was like, don't give up, don't give up. For me, it was, I was super disappointed, but I knew it was coming. It was a very painful moment that made me realize reality.
It didn't make sense to me, even because if it happened a year ago or 2 years ago, but yeah, the game's kind of been dying anyways. Or like when you look at the Steam charts and the numbers. But I also think esports scene has a lot to do with this, where we started Twitch channel for the AA League. A lot of people came back, and with that, a lot of other people joined. The game had, I would believe, the highest numbers it had in like the past year, and we had a lot of other plans as well. All we can say, I don't really know why, and I don't really have a lot of feelings about it besides kind of being pissed because to me the timing was off.
America's Army had always a big potential to have a huge community. But since A3 it went downhill, APG was a really good surprise for everyone in the community. And they had a huge potential, but for some reason the developer team decided to basically change almost everything in the game, putting a lot of resources and time into changing some things that don't make any sense. And the game kinda lost their track and the potential it never reached, so it's a bit disappointing, but the game is fun anyways to play.
While players may lament the lost potential, not all hope is gone. The servers that are closing are only the official ones, and the community will likely keep the game alive through unofficial servers for quite some time. Plus, the 5th game in the series is rumored to be in development, so despite what some may think, the series is far from dead. In the meantime, the Proving Grounds player base gets to enjoy one final hooah.
It's kind of hard to sum up 9 years. All in all, I can say, I guess it was good. It was a blast. It was fun. And I guess, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but the news hit where they're putting out a final patch for APG that is going to turn 24-man server, so 12v12, to a 64 versus 64 servers. And that's their kind of like last gift to APG. It's like, alright, you guys can have this. Try it, see if you like it. This game's probably still gonna be around. But yeah, huge thanks to everyone, and I enjoyed my 7, 8, 9 years that I've been here, and it was a blast.
I've enjoyed the game immensely. There's a reason I've played it for thousands of hours, so I did get a lot of enjoyment out of it. So it's not a complete waste of my time, but I had hoped for so much more.
America's Army's storied 20-plus year history is difficult to condense into one video, and we haven't even touched on its numerous console ports and spin-offs. In those last 20 years, the gaming medium has changed and evolved to fulfill many different uses, including training, informing, and emulating real-life experiences that we may never see ourselves. While you may not agree with what America's Army may advertise, you cannot deny the passion of the player base that plays it and the effort that the developers have put into it. These days, you can pick whatever flavor of American Army shooter that you wish, but there will always be only one series that sticks to its guns a bit more than the rest.
I've worked on it, and it's come a long ways from where it started when we released the beta, and a lot of players have played it, over 5 million accounts and created. Just the stories we've heard. I've gotten handwritten letters from fans that say they enjoy playing it. So being able to be a part of the game and create something that so many people are enjoying is pretty cool.
This video is made possible thanks to our wonderful patrons. Massive thank you to everyone on this list, and shout out to Jason B, Brendan, QB, Foxy, Mauve, Pachanas, Pin, Sierra, Shampoo, Spartacus, Tommy, and Yashichi for being Platinum supporters. And an extra special shout out to Steven, Noodles, and Marco for being Diamond supporters. We really appreciate it. If you want to talk to us, check out our Discord. If you want to support our channel and get info on unreleased videos, check out our Patreon. If you want to help us out in a different way, leaving a like, subscribing, and hitting the bell to stay up to date is also appreciated. My name is Jonah, thanks for watching.